Christian, what do you believe? I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit and born of the Virgin Mary. He suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. The third day he rose again from the dead. He ascended to heaven, and is seated at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From there he will come to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen. Good morning, podcast listeners. This is the Socratic Neighbors Podcast. And I think we figured out that we'll just do, monthly or bi-monthly podcasts. It's not going to be anything, whenever we have time and things like that. So,
yep.
With me in the studio, as always, is
Quick Carl.
And he's actually remotely talking to me with his phone rather than his computer, but that's okay. We'll make it work. He sounds decent. So, and he looks decent too, communicating on FaceTime.
There you go. You only see the top part of me, though.
Yeah, that's true. Don't take the phone any further away from what I already see. On today's episode, we're going to talk about prayer and thoughts and prayers. Hey, Bronco! Heard you had to deal with a Green Bay Packer this weekend.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, that my normal vet wasn't there in the office, so I had his colleague, and I noticed her stethoscope, and I said, "Are you a Packers fan?" She goes, "Yeah, I didn't know." I go, "I looked at your stethoscope." So we had a lively conversation.
Yeah, I bet. It's pretty funny. Yep. So today's episode, prayers. We start out with the Apostles' Creed for those who don't know what the opener was. And we'll probably close today's episode with the Lord's Prayer, if that's okay with you, Mr. Carl.
That's fine.
So yeah, how have you been? How's past month been since we recorded our last episode?
Like I said, it hasn't been too bad. I mean, nothing earth shattering going on or anything like that.
Nothing earth shattering.
No, just getting by and mostly emotional for me. But I got a routine, but I think it's time for me to try to fill my days better.
Yeah. I think I'm filling my days too much. The getting used to the new position down in Naples is a little frustrating, to say the least. But it's just a different position, and it's a little different position than what I was hired for when I moved to Florida, and just getting used to the coworkers and everybody, and it's a little difficult, but
Yeah.
So inspiration for the episode, been going to church more and more. I think my wife finally sat down and found a church that we like. We attended a small group on Wednesday, which, if you are a Christian, I highly recommend small groups in a church. It's very difficult to actually be a good Christian without a community. I don't know if you necessarily agree with that, but the more emphasis on this episode is on prayer and whether prayer actually works, or are we just kidding ourselves? And I think there will be some back and forth about the discussion. This is more. We are not. I want to preface this by saying that neither Quick Carl or myself, Lotus, are theologians by any stretch of the imagination. We don't go into the deep. I don't want to say dark, but we don't go into the deep philosophies behind.
We're not Bible thumpers.
No, we're not Bible thumpers, and we're also not pastors or somebody that spends our entire lives.
My closest thing was 1 year at a Franciscan seminary.
Okay, I haven't even done that, so we're not. I'm decently versed in the Bible. I'm not too terribly versed in the Bible. I'm sure you're more well versed in the Bible than I am. But again, I do want to emphasize that we are not theologists and so if we get stuff wrong and a pastor listens to this episode, if we get stuff wrong, I apologize. But at the same time, we do want to address the issue of, I don't think it's an issue. Well, no, it is an issue. It is an issue in the culture right now with the antagonistic view against thoughts and prayers. And when somebody, I think for me, when somebody talks about thoughts and prayers, it's a sentiment, because there often is something that you cannot. People want to be able. So a lot of people want to be able to do something about either a tragedy or something, even something that's good that happens in your life, and if you can't do anything, then for a Christian, that's what you do, is you pray for that person. And you can give advice. There are limitations, but there are physical limitations to what a Christian is able to do outside of just prayer. And I think prayer is a good source of not only communication with God, but communication with within your own Christian community. And we have in small groups. I don't know if you attend a small group.
No, I don't.
No, you don't. In our small groups, because we're Presbyterian, and if any of our listeners don't know what Presbyterian is basically Catholic without the saints. And right. You're Catholic, right, Carl?
Right, and my wife was Presbyterian, and my kids were raised Presbyterian, so I always said they're pseudo-Catholics.
Right, and so the biggest difference between a Catholic and a Presbyterian is that the Presbyterians don't pray to the priests; it's pray to the saints, or utilize a priest for forgiveness of sins. And so for Presbyterians, there's definitely, I hate using the word ritual, but it's definitely ritualistic in the practices that go into being a Presbyterian. It's very much of an Orthodox type style practice.
Yeah. I mean, I was even an elder in the Presbyterian church. And I also taught Sunday school at Presbyterian Church.
Yeah.
But my roots are Catholic, and I still go to Catholic Mass.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Catholic is very ritualistic and very very Orthodox style religion and beliefs. And I mean, there's so many similarities that I've noticed between the Presbyterian and the Catholicism, and so I blame Martin Luther. I mean, for the differences, really. I mean, that's all it is. But anyway, so for prayer, it's a communication with God, and for us as human beings, it is a way to make requests for our fellow human beings and ourselves, honestly, because we do go through turmoil, and God knows that we're going to go through turmoil. And so it's our way of either venting or asking for relief or asking for more goodness to happen to us, and wishful thinking. And it's a very good line of communication. I mean, I don't know how you view it. I don't know how you feel about it, but that's where I'm at.
Well, as far as prayer goes, Honestly, when I go to church, I hardly pray at all. And the reason is I'm involved in the actual Mass. I'm
Mm-hmm.
giving responses, and I'm listening to the sermons and the gospel, and I'm taking communion, and I'm not. I want to be involved with what's going on, and to do that, I can't start daydreaming and thinking about prayers I want to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to be involved in that service. That's not to say people that don't go to church pray while they're there, but I pray wherever I'm at. I don't need to be in an actual structure to pray to God.
Right.
And there's no sense to it. There's people that don't go to church at all and never go. That doesn't mean they're not good Christians. They can still pray wherever they want. That's their choice. But what happens a lot too, and I'm okay with this, and you see it like forums like Facebook. Somebody sick, somebody got injured, somebody died. We say a prayer for our family. There's nothing wrong with that. I do it all the time.
No.
Ask people to pray for me. I pray for them, and that doesn't mean all your prayers are going to be answered. I mean, in the Catholic Church, another form of praying is saying a rosary, which is a lot of Our Fathers and Hail Marys and an Apostle Creed. We go through acts of contrition, all that stuff, in a rosary, and it's another form of praying. Just driving down the street and having a conversation with God. I can do that behind the steering wheel. I'm paying attention to driving, but I'm also thinking about stuff with God. I can do both. And some pastors and priests will tell you, well, you really need to be in the church to get the full thing. No, I don't, but I do go. I pretty religiously go to mass every Sunday, and I don't miss it. But at the same time, if I didn't go, would still pray to God in my own way. It's not going to change anything. Now, another thing that um, I've had experience with is I feel like my prayers go unanswered sometimes, and especially with my wife who passed away. I prayed and prayed and prayed that God would just take her, that sounds bad, but she suffered so bad that I wanted him to go, wanted her to go with him, and he drug it out and he drug it out, and it just like I just talked to him and said, hey, you know, if you really are a true God, why are you making her suffer this long? Please take her. But again, I can't control that. That's God's decision we go and when we don't, and who gets sick and who doesn't. He has no control over that. But I hate to see kids suffering, and they shouldn't have to go through all these diseases and problems when they're little kids, and they lose a limb or something. It's like that's something I'm going to ask God when I go. When I go, my time's up. I'm going to say, why? Why do you do this? And that's not saying that He's not answering my prayers so much, but sometimes you get to a point where you feel like He's not answering your prayers, and it doesn't mean He doesn't hear your prayers, because He hears them, but He has to decide what to act on and what not to. For example, another example. Excuse me. People will pray that they have money. People will pray that they get a new car. Okay, first off, these are, to my opinion, are dumb things to pray for. You can pray for a place to live, and you can pray for a car, but you don't have to have the most fanciest car or the most biggest house. And if you want to pray for money, then go get a job. Do something like that. You can't just pray and say, I want money. God's not going to answer you. And if He does, then He's setting you up for something, because you're not going to learn anything from that. If God helps you get a job interview and you get a job, He was there with you. If you finally get a car and it just worked out that you got a car, I would say God was there with you too. He answered your prayers, but it might not be the way you're expecting it to be answered. And I think prayers are powerful. A lot of people think, well, praying's a waste of time, or I'm not getting anything out of it. Well, it's whatever you put into it is what you get out of it. And that's the way it is going to church. If you just show up, you're not going to get anything out of it. But if you get involved with what's going on at church, then you'll get more out of it. And it'll give you more incentive to pray because you're getting that education about God and the Bible that makes you want to pray. It's a stepping stone. And if you're not interested, that's great. Then don't be interested. And don't pray if you don't want to. Nobody's forcing you to pray. But if you're a Christian, you got to believe that God's with you, whether you're praying to him or not. And prayers are powerful. Things just work out sometimes. And some people say, well, it wasn't because of my prayers. It just worked out that way. I'm not so sure about that. I prayed before and got things that I prayed for, and then I got things that I didn't. It's a crapshoot, okay? But it isn't, like I said, God hears everything. He knows everything. And then again, if you're a Christian, you believe that. Now, if you're an atheist, you wouldn't believe that. But I'm not going to force my religion down someone who doesn't believe in God. And you and I both know someone that would do that.
Right.
But I'm not going to do that to anybody. You're entitled to your belief, whether I agree with it or not. I'm not going to get in a big theological argument with you. This podcast is about prayer, not religion. And that could be a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, we can cover the gamut on religion and whether religion has been effective or not.
Right.
There's a lot to unpack there with your monologue. I let you, and no, I was not on mute. I quick Carl, he got on quite a few good points, and I want to address them. Packing out. So there was a episode of Mark Gungor I listened to recently. Well, not recently, but relatively earlier this year, that talked about righteous versus unrighteous prayer. And it harkens back to the concept of God only gives you what you want, what you need, not what you want. And you know what you need, but you don't ever ask for what you need. You ask for what you want. And so asking for a car from God, and God gives you a beat up Honda versus a Porsche, often people will there goes back to the saying of beggars can't be choosers.
Right.
Because God answered your prayer, he just did, like you said, he didn't answer the prayer he didn't answer it in the way that you thought he would.
Yeah.
With my wife and I, we prayed for better opportunities, and when we were in Houston, we prayed for better opportunities, a way for us to really kind of start our own life. And it's not that we didn't start our own life in Houston, but when the opportunity moved to Florida, that was kind of it was really an answered prayer.
Sure.
We were looking to start our own life, and it was not like you said, it was not in a place that we expected. It was not in what we had thought about. And I had thought, oh, well, we're moving to Florida, we'll move to Orlando, because that's where the company headquarters is because I'm being looked at more and more. I'm getting more calls from the CEO. I'm getting more calls from my bosses, I was thinking Orlando, and here we are going to Fort Myers, and it's like, this isn't what we had talked about, God. This isn't we had talked about this. And I do that all the time too. I pray in the car, I pray on my commutes, and hoping that I will be, my hope is that I'll always be challenged, and I'll always find creative ways to be productive and not destructive. And with me getting transferred to Naples, it's definitely I have to be productive. I can't be destructive, and I don't want to get I would say my prayer is that I hope I don't ever get bored to the point where I start being destructive. And I think with I don't know whether that's a good prayer or a bad prayer, but clearly God is answering my prayers by doing what he's doing, and I tend to think that there is prayer that can go unanswered. And this is going to get really personal, but my wife and I have been trying to have kids for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And she has polycystic ovary syndrome, which, I mean, if there's people out there that probably know what it is, and But she has difficulty conceiving, and she's been praying nonstop for the past 2 years about it, and it's still an unanswered prayer. For me, I haven't been praying. I haven't been praying for a kid. I've been praying that she finds solace and peace with what she's dealing with. And it's hard because it's something that she really, really wants. And like it hard, and this is going to sound harsh, but sometimes, and it often, like I said before, God gives you what you need, not what you want.
Right.
And maybe for us, I think maybe, we're starting to look into adoption and not necessarily go the natural childbirth route, but maybe for us, it's not in the cards, and maybe we're looking to fill somebody else's need,
Well, yeah, sure. And you know what? Maybe your prayer will be answered, and not, like you said, not the way you might be expecting it. Like she may not conceive, but you might adopt a child that really needs a home, and it's a special child. And it could be an infant or maybe a little older kid, but it'll still be a blessing whether you have a child naturally or you adopt. You have to look at it that way. And God, there's so many kids that need a good family to live in.
Sure.
So that God could bless you in a way that might touch you differently than what, like you said, what you're expecting. But it's still a prayer that may not be answered now, but down the road, yeah, definitely. I mean, get back to my wife just for a minute. I kept praying for him to take it, and he finally did take her. But he was still answering my prayers. We ended up in Texas. I think that was something that was meant to be, and we were struggling where we were at. I was struggling to take care of her, is basically what it was. But I got sick, and things worked out where her sister came up and got her, and then we came down here, and then she was around her family. I was praying for something, and maybe it didn't work out like I thought, but at least it worked out where we got support, and she was able to pass away with her family around, which wouldn't have happened if we were up there.
Right. And
So
maybe,
it got answered in a roundabout way. You could look at it like that.
yeah, and maybe that was the whole design of it, is
Right.
that
Yeah.
is that it was supposed to be that way.
But at the time, you're at a point, and I understand what you're saying. You're at a point where it's not getting answered right now, and it's not getting answered the way I think it should get answered. But
Right.
it still could be answered.
Right. Well, and the disgust that you look at the Parkland shooting, and we don't want from David Hogg. We don't want your thoughts and prayers. Why not? They're free. They're not doing you any harm.
Right.
I think they're doing more good than they are harm.
Sure.
And he's like, well, we want action now. My thing is, not everybody can do everything at once, and things take time. Humans are impatient beings, naturally impatient.
Well, yes and no. They are in this country, but in other countries, they're not always as anxious as we are.
Right. I agree.
But you're right. That. You're right about naturally we are anxious. But if you go to some countries in Europe, everything's kind of laid back, and they're not in a rush to do anything.
Right. But that's also because they have government mandated 3-month vacation.
That would help.
I would think that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
But I still think even though I still think that there's got to be people in Europe that are impatient or are looking for prayers to be answered that are not getting answered. I think
utopia.
I think this is more of a generic than trying to find exceptions. It's a generic rule rather than trying to find an exception. And so while I just think that it takes it takes a lot of strength to pray for somebody. And you look at the Kavanaugh hearings, his daughter prayed for Blasey Ford.
Yeah.
That's like he said, like Kavanaugh said, that's a lot of wisdom for a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
You know, that's not something that an adult has the impulse to do right away, particularly with an accusation like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at the church shooting in South Carolina with that church. I mean, it was not like a Nazi guy that shot up a black church, you know, and the first thing that church did was forgave him and prayed for him.
Not only that, they invited him to pray with them. He invited him to his study group. So they were very outgoing, and they were very welcoming.
Right. And I think it shows the strength of it shows God's strength, and it shows the strength of the Christian community. And it's something that you just don't hear about. And it's unfortunate that you don't hear about things like that. For prayer, I mean, it's hard for me. It's hard for me to pray for things, because I know that I shouldn't be praying for wants, and I should be praying righteous prayers.
You're human,
but I'm human. That's exactly right, and it's hard to be. I remember one of my first prayers when I became a born again Christian, right after I started dating my wife, was to restore the relationship with my dad, because it was a rocky relationship with my dad all the way through college, and my dad and I had a decent relationship, as in childhood, and I wouldn't say it was perfect. I don't think anybody's relationship with their parents is perfect during their childhood.
No, not at all.
You know,
even in an adult life, a lot of times.
Yeah, and even in adult, but I mean, I'd say my dad and I's relationship's pretty good now.
You also had a dad that traveled a lot too,
right? And you know, but my dad and I get along pretty well right now, and I think that's definitely an answered prayer. And I don't want to use this episode to like come up with examples of answered prayers or something like that.
Yeah.
It's
but it's not wrong to throw a few in just to show what's going on with prayer.
Right. And I definitely I definitely would think that there's a lot of prayers that I've prayed for that have gone unanswered. And it's either they've gone unanswered because I prayed the wrong prayer, or they've gone unanswered because that's not something that I needed, you know?
Right, yeah. If God didn't respond at all, then it's like, move along, brother.
Right. For sure. Well, I was watching an episode, I was watching a debate between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris. And Sam Harris is like one of the biggest atheists in the country right now. And his whole shtick is the logic of reason, that reason is what's carried humanity through the ages, and not foundations of religion or morality or things like that. And I agree with him to a certain extent, but I definitely disagree with him on a majority of the things that he thinks he talks about. Yeah. And religion is one of them. And he thinks that religion has done more harm than good. And there are quite a few people that and he doesn't understand the concept of prayer, that his big question to Christians is like, why does God do this? And and the first response that he gets is, Sam, every single Christian asks that question. Like, why does God allow evil to happen? Every single Christian asks that question. There is no Christian, no Jew, no Muslim on the face of the planet that does not try to ask that question and try to get an answer. And it's not meant to be a deterrent from Christianity. It is meant to make you more curious as to God's overall plan for you and for the people around you. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you talk about shootings, and I mean, they happen a lot of places. The schools are one that it happen quite often. And,
Yeah.
I look back on all our legislative wisdom and wonder why they ever allowed prayer to be taken out of school.
Agreed.
Because prayer, if those students still had prayer in school, I'm not saying these shootings wouldn't occur, but it could have slowed them down.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a foundational, I think basic morality. If you allowed Christianity or even Judaism or some form of it to be allowed in the schooling in schools, I think it would if you started teaching morality to a lot of kids, it would deter a lot of the anxiety that kids have.
Definitely. And they even took away the Pledge of Allegiance because it says under God.
Right.
What the heck is going on?
Even though the money says "In God We Trust."
Right. So you're not going to take the money anymore because it's God's name's on it.
It's got God's names on it, and it's so silly.
And I have to say, really God, like that. I'm not trying to use the Lord's name in vain, and I do sometimes. But you know what? I'm saying a prayer to Him every time I cuss and saying, "Hey, I'm getting your attention. Pay attention."
Right. Yeah. Conversations with God are definitely interesting.
Yeah, there's so many ways to go on those.
Yeah. I agree with you. The other thing I wanted to unpack was that you had mentioned earlier before was the concept of individual versus communal prayer. So you had touched on two different things there with individual versus communal prayer. And most pastors, their goal is to encourage not only individual prayer, but communal prayer as well. Because there is strength in the force of numbers.
Oh, sure.
And I also think that it's up to a pastor. Often pastors are meant to decipher not only their own prayers in terms of what is best for a church, but also what is best for a church requests prayers.
Because they have, you're right, they have requests. And one thing I want to touch on real quick when you mentioned that, I didn't mean to say that I don't pray at church. I don't pray for myself at church. I am involved in the mass, but I'm saying their prayers.
Right.
And so I am praying, but it's not an individualistic thing for me.
Right.
Even though some people probably do the individual prayers at church, I usually pray with the service.
Well, and that's the whole concept. And then it's also part of being involved as a community with your faith, is that you can't know what people are going through unless you either participate in that prayer or you've read the prayer request list, because often people disclose things to the prayer request list that they're not willing to just talk about. And because it's often easier to submit your tribulations to God than it is to submit them to somebody else. And it's easier for me to say, I would like a prayer request for my wife going through what she's going through, or like I did in the small group for my grandfather, because my grandfather's getting older. He's 92, and I don't want him to pass away, but I also don't want my mom. I also want my mom's burden to be easy if he ever passes away. And my grandfather's getting up there. We all know he may pass in the next 5-10 years, but at the same time, you still have to wrestle with the passing. You still have to wrestle with death and grief. There's the whole grief process that my mom has to go through because she's taking care of my grandfather for so long. And so it's I mean, it's been going on 20 years and a couple of years, it's like been 15 years since they moved here. And since they moved here, I say here, I mean, since they moved to Texas.
To Texas, I know what you meant.
And I'm just trying to clarify for our listeners, not necessarily for you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But because so I there's, for prayer, often people bring it to God rather than bringing it to the community, because it is much easier to submit to a higher power than it is to submit to your peers. And often you want to give the best that's why Facebook is such a troll website is because often you want to give the best version of yourself over to the Facebook gods that rather than reveal anything negative about you. And that's why you see all these women going, duck face, you know, like it's just they want to create the best version of themselves online, even for these online dating sites too. They want you to see the best version of themselves, and they don't want you to see the real you. And for me, I mean, I really just don't care that much about Facebook, and I don't care that much about Twitter, and I mostly use it to follow what's going on in the world. I really don't post a whole lot. I'm not into the mob culture that it currently exists on these websites. And, you know, and if I see something controversial and I want to comment it, I comment on it. But
sure.
You know, and people are like, oh, well, you're so perfect. It's like, no, I never said I was perfect. It's just your thought that you're thinking is wrong. And for a lot of people, particularly for Christians, submitting to God is easier than submitting to the community, but it's also very, very difficult at the same time. And it sounds like an oxymoron, but it's not. It's easier to submit it to God, but it's also harder because you're submitting to a higher power and you're asking for something from a higher power. And it is harder to get that from a higher power than it is from your community. And I think that it is intrinsic upon the community, your Christian community, to participate and share your pain with you. And it often, I you know, when I got first, because I haven't done much evangelizing, and that's because I'm not in the same phase of my Christian walk with God as other people are. And I was approached at our church in Houston about talking to a guy who is an atheist and has been asking questions about the faith and questioning the faith. And I guess he was a former Christian. And all I said, what did I say to him? All I said was, you know, nobody forces you to come to God. God doesn't even force you to come to God. It's your choice. It's what you believe and what God has done for you and for the people around you as to why people around me as to why I worship God. Because God has done a lot in my life, and God has done a lot in the lives of the people around me, particularly my wife's life. I don't think if my wife wasn't really, I think I'm jumbling over myself. I don't think if my wife was religious that she would be at the same at the stage of life that she's at. I don't think she'd be married. I don't think she'd be out of California. I don't think she would have moved to Florida with me if she had not been a Christian, because she had faith. She had faith that it would get taken care of. And so far it has. It's worked out for her. And sometimes she doubts that. Quite often she doubts that. I doubt that too sometimes, but that's okay. And that's where the power of prayer comes in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, and you know, we were talking about prayers. Sometimes I think there's things I want to pray for, and in my mind, I think it's wrong to pray for it, but because I'm trying to fill a need, and it's not a material thing necessarily. It's just it's more relationship wise. You know that I you know, I've been a widower now for a year. I'm coming up on a year next Saturday, and I don't know. I mean, if it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But you know, I get lonely, and I pray that I'll meet someone sometimes, and it's like I don't know if it's ever going to happen, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But that's an ongoing prayer for me because of the situation I'm in. I just I want to be with somebody, and it doesn't have to be a lifetime commitment necessarily, but I just want a companion. And I have a dog, but I went a little bit more than that. But I'll tell you what, he's been a godsend to me. My dog, he's he's everything to me right now.
Yeah. And there's a reason that, and I think dogs are definitely answered prayers, because there's a reason that they're called man's best friend. You know,
absolutely.
There's definitely a spiritual connection that often can happen with a dog that acts as an answered prayer.
Yeah, and you know, going back to animals and prayers, you know, if something happened to your pet, you're going to pray. I mean, depending on the pet, their lifespan isn't going to be quite as long, and then some live a long time depending on what type of pet it is. But they're family as far as I'm concerned. They're not just a pet. They're
Right.
they're a member of your family, and you're going to pray for them when they need something, or you're going to pray for God to do something. And this, you're not in this situation yet, but it's talking about prayers. I can remember several times that my kids I thought were on the verge of this is it, and I prayed to God, and I prayed not only for them to be healed, but I prayed that if He was going to take someone to take me, I would sacrifice myself for Him. If He was looking like this is it, they're not going to make it, then take me. I've lived my life. Save my children. It never came to that, but that's a prayer that I remember saying more than once.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely hard. That it I remember the line from Lord of the Rings, and I don't know if it's reflected in anything else, but I remember a line from the Lord of the Rings that parents are not meant to bury their children, and there's you know, and you can't, and parents would rather see their child succeed and them go through turmoil than the other way around.
Right. Yeah,
and
I don't know what that's like, you know, to lose a child as a parent. I whether they're 1 year old or 50 years old, it's got to be tough.
Right.
It's got to be really hard on you.
Yeah, I asked my mom how she would react, and she says I would lose it. She says if one of you kids died, I would lose it.
Yeah.
She said she said just the thought of it makes me disgusts me. It's the most frustrating. It's the most frustrating thing as a parent to think that could happen.
Oh yeah.
And it's also the worst thing that could happen, because that means you're not a parent anymore.
Well, and plus, you know? Like, give me an example. Laura's mother had 2 brothers. It was her and her 2 brothers, and her 2 brothers died within 6 months of each other, and it was just her. After that, and her dad started drinking. I mean, I'm sure I would be asking God, it's bad enough you took one of my sons, but you took them both.
Yeah.
And everybody gave him crap about drinking. I said, if that happened to me, I'd probably be hitting a bottle all the time. Yeah. And I might be praying and then wonder why God let this happen. And I don't fault him. Everybody in the family was like negative about it. And I said, you don't know anything until you've been in that situation.
Right. Agreed. You know, I think you know, he can exercise better judgment by not using drinking as a path to relief of his grief, but at the same time, I agree with you. I don't fault him for turning to that as a
right. I mean, he could have turned to the church more. I mean, I don't think they were regular churchgoers anyway, but he could have turned to the church maybe and got some solace from that, and maybe got help from a minister or a priest. And that helped him, you know. I know this sounds melodramatic, but see the light.
Yeah.
You know, and not go to it. But you're right. He could have made a better choice, but I'm not going to fault him for the choice he did make.
He made a choice. He made a choice, and I think he probably felt forced into it.
Yeah.
And
It was a way to ease his pain. He
yeah,
found a different way.
it's
Everybody mourns in their own way.
yeah.
I know from
Everybody deals
experience.
with stress. Everybody deals with stress. Everybody deals with mourning. Everybody deals. Well, and my wife asked me that recently. She's like, "What would happen if I died?" And I was like, "Well, this is pretty, it's a pretty dark question,
Yeah.
you know." And she's like, "Well, no. What would you do? Would you get remarried? Would you?" I said, I wouldn't go looking again. I said, I would probably. She's like, "Well, then what would you do?" I said, "Well, we have the dogs, so I'd have to worry about them. But I said, I would probably throw myself into my work. I would work ridiculous amount of hours. You know, I said, that's just the way I would deal with it. You know, and I said, you'd be put in the ground, and then I'd be working like 120 hours in a week just to ignore it. You know, and that's me trying to deal with it and trying to process it. You know, and it's probably not gonna be healthy. But losing you isn't healthy.
No.
You know, it's not healthy for me.
I'm going through it.
Yeah,
You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, and I said, you know, and I think she took comfort in that. But you know, I also don't like thinking about that. That makes me pretty.
Yeah, I know, and especially at your age, it shouldn't have to come up on your radar screen.
No, it shouldn't.
You know, but or you could have told her, "I'm going to sell all your stuff and find a trophy wife."
Yeah, that's what I should have told her. I said, "Well, I'll finally buy a motorcycle."
There you go. Oh yeah, there you go. You get worse.
Yeah, she won't let me buy a motorcycle.
No, but I can totally relate, and hopefully you never have to. Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. One of you is going to have to go through that.
Yeah.
Unless you both go at the same time.
Yeah. Well, if we both go at the same time, then that's an easy way to resolve it.
Exactly.
Yeah, we were.
But don't pray for that. Don't pray that you both go at the same time.
No, that's not.
And don't, you know, don't. That's something you don't want to have to deal with until the time comes.
Right.
And so I wouldn't. You probably want to pray and ask God for some guidance if you hit that situation, but live your life, and some things don't need to be prayed for at certain times. It's just the way it is.
Right. Well, death is definitely not something that needs to be prayed for.
No.
You know,
I know people that will pray that, I hope I go in my sleep, or I hope I don't suffer when I go, or I want to go quick.
Yeah. Well,
they will pray for that sometimes.
In your case, for Laura, you just didn't want her to suffer. You know, that's
exactly.
Like that's not wishing death upon her. You're just not wishing suffering.
Exactly.
You know, and I think that there's just quite a bit of logic to that, and I think there's quite a bit of reason and almost perfect understanding of that. That you don't want the people around you to suffer.
No.
You know, and if I was to pass, or if my wife was to pass, you know, one of us, either one of us is going to be suffering.
Right.
But, you know, at the same time.
Yeah, you're both suffering, but differently.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, we're at 49 minutes.
Right 49 minutes? Okay.
Yeah. Should we wrap up, or you want to keep going?
Yeah, that's fine. Unless you got anything else you want to add to it.
No, we don't need to wrap up.
As usual, we didn't have anything planned. We just start talking.
Yeah, it was good 45-minute conversation. I think it's I think prayer is one of the quintessential values of being a Christian. And I definitely think that it's a good. It's the only way to get. It's one of the only ways to get as close to God as you can, to talk to Him. You know, and even if there's no response, it's still a way to talk. You know, it's a way to ask why.
And it doesn't have to be formal. You can just carry on a conversation.
For sure.
Your side's it's one-sided, but some people experience the other side of that conversation.
Yep, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
So anything new going on? Are you getting acclimated?
No, I mean, we're getting acclimated. I'm trying to get ready for vacation. Be coming out. I'll be in your neck of the woods on the 17th of this month.
There you
go. Going to Austin on the 18th for Formula One. Formula One is in the United States the 19th, 20th, and 21st. So that's gonna be fun.
Is Ferrari doing any better?
Ferrari is not. They're 50 points. They're 50 points behind in the driver standing, and they are 120 points behind, I think, in the constructors.
Well, the good news is they're crashing a lot of Ferraris on the new Magnum PI. So that means they got to replace. They got to keep replacing them.
Right. Well, the thing that I've noticed for this year is that Ferrari does have the better car, just not the better drivers.
Yeah. And so just as a disclaimer, I have stock in Ferrari. That's why I'm mentioning Ferrari.
That's why you're going for Ferrari. Vettel has made way too many mistakes, and then Raikkonen. They haven't let Raikkonen actually do a proper race, and when they've let him do a proper race, they've done the wrong strategy, and so that's the problem. It happened in Monza where they pitted Vettel they put Vettel on the wrong strategy, and they've made too many bad decisions. There's just so many mistakes all around for Maurizio Arrivabene, who's the team principal. He's just made too many mistakes, and it's the whole team is suffering from the mistakes that he's making, and that's not. It's not entirely his fault, but it's also he's the main guy. It's his team, you know, and the drivers are not necessarily making good decisions either. So it's kind of a mishmash of.
They should hire getaway drivers.
They should.
Those guys don't have a gun and a loot stuff.
They should. Next week and a half, I'm gonna be gearing up for vacation, and getting ready to go out to Texas for a few days. So that'll be fun. And then probably visit you and a couple other my buddies and things like that.
Yeah. And we may do a podcast while you're here.
May do a podcast. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
So, what you got going on next couple weeks?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it. I'm sure I have something on my plate. I have I still have my grieving group, and so I haven't been going as regularly as I should. But I'm going to a different one at the hospice that took care of Laura. So that's been a little helpful, and Bronco. He's been going with me more places. I haven't left him at home as much. Him and I have been doing a lot of trips together. Good. So he not only am I getting out when I do go out, but I take him with me. So it hasn't been too bad. Plus, I had to kind of watch him while they're painting the building, which has taken them now over 2 months because they keep saying they're going to get it done and they don't. So that's something really minor on my plate. But I have to keep track of my dog because I can't leave him there while they're outside the building. I would go ballistic all day.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my life right now. Except for the Bears are in first place, which is a good thing, and the Astros won yesterday, so that's a good thing.
And they're playing today. Who are they playing today?
And they're playing the Indians.
The Indians. Okay.
Yeah, they won yesterday. So game 2's today. So that's exciting. I'm sad that the Rockies lost, but they're down 2 games to Milwaukee, so hopefully they can come back. Because I'd like to see the Astros and the Rockies in the World Series. That'd be
cool.
Awesome.
That would be cool. For sure.
But other than that, no, I haven't really. I don't really have anything. Going to church every week and talking to my buds.
Yep. Doing the podcast with me.
Yeah, doing a podcast with you.
Yeah.
And hey, speaking of the podcast, have you ever got a hold of your buddy to do the one on gaming?
Oh, we do need to do the one on gaming. Yes, I got a hold of him. I should have asked him about it. shoot. No, yeah, we'll have to do the one on gaming.
Yeah, definitely.
The next couple of months or so.
My son was talking about coming out this month, the one you know. But he's not sure now when that is going to happen in October.
Okay.
So he may not make it because he said he's got to make a trip to Minnesota for something. He's been up there before, and I don't know why. But there's something going on up there. And
government secrets is what it is.
That's right. Well, I think he told me, but I probably just zoned him out. I don't want to know all those secrets.
Right.
But anyway, he would probably have a layover here in Houston and probably stretch it out to a couple days. So
yeah.
But I don't know exactly when he's coming, and it may not even be now. He might have pushed it back. But he is doing something for his kids. He's now the scoutmaster for his boys' Cub Scout troop.
That's cool.
Yeah,
it's good. It's good.
So he's got that going on. My other son, he's doing okay. He's still doing telemarketing. I think that's going to be his thing.
Yeah,
he's good at it. So, we'll see what happens. But yeah, they're both doing okay. I'm glad I went to Denver for a couple of weeks, but I'm glad I'm back home. But then I'll when I get the urge, I'll take another trip somewhere.
Yep. Yeah, I'm trying to plan a vacation next year with my wife and the dogs. We'll do something fun.
Oh yeah, just you guys and the dogs. Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, next year. Well, next year's our 5-year anniversary.
Yeah, there you go.
So I think I'd like to plan something, do something a little bit fun. That'd be good.
Yeah, that would be good. And even if you don't leave the state, you got a lot of recreational stuff there.
For sure. Oh yeah, definitely. Well, maybe we'll take advantage of her Hilton discount because she can stay at almost any Hilton for like $35 a night or something like that.
Oh, is that something from her parents or something?
No, it's from her work. She works at a Hilton, so.
Oh, she's working at Hilton now.
Yeah, she works at a Hilton Garden Inn.
Oh, okay. So she left. She left Wawa.
Yeah, she left Wawa. She left Wawa not because of the company, but because of the clientele at night.
Yeah. So, you get some weirdos at night.
Yeah. So anyway.
So what's she doing at Hilton?
She's a server for the breakfast shift.
Oh, all right.
So she works like 5 a.m. till sometimes 1 in the afternoon. And so
I worked at a hotel once.
Yeah. So, but she makes good money. I mean, she's getting good tips, and people seem to like her, and her bosses like her, and
good.
So it's good. It's good.
Hey, this kind of Hilton, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Anyway, yeah, you can, if listeners want to find us, you can find us at Socratic Podcast on the Twitters. You can email us, socraticneighbors@gmail.com. Find us on YouTube, Socratic Neighbors. Also find us on any podcast form, whether that's Google Play or iTunes or things like that. We're gonna do a couple. I don't know what we're gonna do for our live episode for the two of us on the 17th, but we'll figure something out.
We'll come up with something.
And then we'll definitely do a gaming episode after I get back from Texas, and we'll integrate Fluffy. That's his name. That's what he goes by. It's not his actual name, but that's what he goes by. Fluffy.
Is it Flupper, his real name?
No. I'm gonna tell him you said that though, or you can tell him you said that.
Sure, why not?
But anyway, give us a shout. If you think prayer is a good thing, then let us know. If you think prayer is a bad thing, then let us know and tell us why. And be respectful. Don't be a fan.
If you like the podcast, tell me. If you don't, tell him.
Yeah.
We'll make it easy.
Yeah. Give us a review on iTunes. We always like those things. 5 stars, whatever. Yeah, 5 stars would be great. I know that we sound better than most podcasts out there.